At 67, Patricia Mendez lived a life that many would describe as quiet, even uneventful. She tended her garden, took morning walks around the lake near her Florida condo, and volunteered twice a week at the local library. To most, she was a sweet, silver-haired woman with a fondness for chamomile tea and crossword puzzles. But Patricia carried a secret, not one of shame, but one she had learned to keep to herself after years of subtle judgment and unspoken rules. Patricia still masturbated. It wasn't something she broadcast, obviously. There were no conversations about it during her weekly bridge games, no casual mentions over Sunday brunch with her daughter. But in the privacy of her bedroom, in the stillness of night, she allowed herself the pleasure she had always known her body was capable of. For years, she had assumed she was one of the few. That self-pleasure belonged to the realm of youth, something tangled up with experimentation, hormones, or loneliness. But as she grew older, something shifted. She realized her desire hadn't vanished. It had simply matured. It was less about fantasy and more about connection, to her own body, to her sense of self, to life itself. But she also noticed how taboo it remained. When her friend Eleanor made a joking reference to her dry spell during lunch one afternoon, the table burst into laughter. Patricia smiled too, but it was a half-hearted gesture. No one spoke seriously about sexuality after 60. The assumption seemed to be that chapter is closed, except Patricia knew it wasn't. Still, doubt crept in sometimes. Was it weird? Was it unhealthy? Was she doing something no one her age admitted to? It was her doctor, surprisingly, who opened the door. During her annual checkup, a routine question, any changes in sexual health or desire, lingered in the air. Patricia hesitated, then said, not really. Still pretty active, on my own. To her relief, the doctor nodded without judgment. That's actually good to hear. Masturbation remains a healthy part of aging, emotionally and physically. Patricia blinked. It is? The doctor smiled. There's still a stigma, but it's one of the best-kept secrets to aging well. Keeps circulation going, helps with sleep, maintains pelvic floor strength, and maybe most importantly, it keeps you in touch with your body as it changes. For the first time in a long time, Patricia felt validated. That night, she sat on her bed with her journal and wrote down everything the doctor had said. It wasn't about indulgence. It was about care, about awareness, and about refusing to accept that growing older meant growing disconnected from your own pleasure. The more she explored the idea, the more she discovered. Masturbation after 60, she learned, could help reduce stress and lower blood pressure. It released endorphins that lifted mood, improved sleep quality, and even reduced the frequency of hot flashes and night sweats for some women. For men, it helped maintain erectile function by keeping blood flow active and responsive. And for both, it kept the nervous system connected to touch, which could otherwise dull over time. It wasn't about fantasy or escapism. It was about staying in tune. But it wasn't just the science that struck Patricia. It was the sense of ownership. After decades of being a wife, a mother, a caregiver, she had found a part of herself that was hers alone. There was no one to perform for, no expectations to meet. It was intimacy stripped of all obligation, pure, gentle, and surprisingly empowering. Still, not everyone saw it that way. One afternoon, during a conversation at the library, she mentioned, lightly, carefully, that aging didn't mean giving up on feeling good in your own body. The younger volunteer, barely 30, raised an eyebrow and said, I don't really think about that kind of thing when I think of seniors. Patricia gave a small laugh. Neither did I when I was your age, but I do now. She didn't go further, but the conversation stayed with her. Why were older adults so often desexualized? Why were pleasure and aging seen as opposites? She began reading more. Articles from sex-positive therapists, forums for older women reclaiming their desires, books that framed intimacy not as something that fades, but as something that evolves. And over time, Patricia began to see herself differently, not as someone clinging to youth, but as someone discovering a new kind of freedom. One evening, her friend Eleanor came over for tea. They sat on the balcony watching the sun melt into the lake. After a long silence, Eleanor said, Do you ever miss that kind of closeness? I mean, it's been years for me, and sometimes I feel like that whole part of me is just gone. Patricia hesitated, then replied carefully, It's not gone. You just might not be listening to it anymore. Eleanor looked over, eyebrows raised. I mean with yourself, Patricia said gently. You don't need someone else to feel that kind of connection. I think we forget that. Eleanor said nothing for a while, just nodded slowly. You still do? Patricia didn't smile, didn't flinch. I do, and I think it's one of the best things I still have. It wasn't about confession, it was about truth. Over time, Patricia noticed something else. As she allowed herself this private freedom, she also felt more confident in other areas of her life. She dressed with more thought, not to impress but to express. She carried herself taller. Her laughter came more easily. Pleasure, she realized, wasn't selfish. It was a form of presence, of knowing you're still here, still alive, still worthy of joy. Aging didn't mean turning off the light inside. It just meant learning to tend to it differently. So yes, Patricia Mendez was over 60. She lived alone. She gardened, volunteered, went to water aerobics, and she still masturbated, not because she was lonely, but because she was whole.